Disney's gonna come out with a new fucking Seven Dwarfs movie. Disney's making bad decisions. Surprise, a fucking prize. Can Disney not? You know, they could. They could just actually take IPs that didn't do very well and redo those instead. Like the Black Cauldron, which would look so good in live action. And you could totally... Oh my god, with the Horn King looking like one of the Pirates of the Caribbean, but with like the undead ones. But I digress. They're making a stupid, shitty Seven Dwarfs movie. Now, I promise you that whatever you're imagining about how bad Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is going to be, you're not prepared. Peter Dinklage said that the Seven Dwarfs are an insult, but the reality is more complex. Some actors in the Little People community are not thrilled to have the Emmy-winning actor serve as their spokesperson. Most minority groups, usually aren't too happy with an individual being quoted by mainstream as somebody who speaks for them, which I think is reasonable. I think that's a reasonable complaint. Emmy-winning actor Peter Dinklage has made a point of refusing to take stereotypical roles commonly reserved for little people, LP, but he has never been one to address the challenges that he and other LP actors face in Hollywood. That changed during an interview with Mark Maron's January 24th What the Fuck podcast, during a conversation regarding Disney's upcoming live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Dinklage praised Disney's for casting Latina actress as Snow White, but condemned them for continuing to present what he believed were outdated stereotypes. Quote, "Literally no offense to anything, but I was sort of taken aback," he said. Quote, They were very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White, but you're still telling the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that fucking backwater story about seven dwarves living in a cave together. Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough." End quote. The day of the interview's publication, Disney stated that it wanted to consult with members of the dwarfism community on the film. A day later, the studio changed tactics. It would change the dwarf characters to magical creatures created with CGI, and that's where the real trouble began. So they had never had any intention of consulting with anybody. Let's be real here. And to me, this is a two-pronged problem. Right? There's the problem of problematic stereotypes, and there's a problem with a lack of representation. There's no reason that little people should only be cast as, like, hobbits and dwarves and whatever they were in Willow. But also, one of the funny things about Willow is Willow had an entire community, and all of the actors in that community within that fantasy world were all little people, and brownies, or like proportion people without dwarfism, and the brownies were all filmed with like green screen and stuff to make them super duper tiny. Anyway, Time Bandits, and there's no. The thing is it wrong to cast little people as a little people race in a fantasy world? Maybe not. It depends on how you're presenting it, right? I can't believe, it boggles my mind that nobody has said, I haven't seen anybody of any kind of repute get into it with Lord of the Rings. I cannot believe the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit were done the way they were. We gotta invent an entire way of filming to avoid casting little people. Like, I could not believe it. But it's a two-pronged problem, right? You can't only cast them in these roles. If you're only casting them in these roles, it's a problem. What you should be casting them is for any role that it fits. If they're a good enough actor, then there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't play, like, the best friend of a buddy cop show. Like, there's no reason. None whatsoever. I call bullshit. If you're a member of the little people community, or the disability community in general, you've seen this story before. The media frenzy followed by backpedaling, followed by the eventual erasure of disability altogether. When Universal released its 2012 feature Snow White and the Huntsman, the film drew ire for casting actors of regular height using CGI to shrink them. Even when a production did cast little people, they did with another, as they did with another 2012 Snow White tale, Mirror Mirror, starring Julia Roberts, the dwarfism community continued to question why this narrative seemed to be the only one that their casting could represent. Right. Exactly. Should they have these roles? Yes, if you're denying them these roles, that you shouldn't be. There's no reason to. But if you're denying them other roles, that's also a problem. Two-pronged problem. Dinklage weighing in is something new. In fact, it's so unusual that one disabled actor who spoke to IndieWire on condition of anonymity said they believed Dinklage was speaking in jest. Quote, Dinklage was like, I spent my time on the soapbox, and he really actually hasn't, the actor said. Quote, he's kind of been a genius at averting the topic. I can name a dozen little people who have talked more about this topic than Peter. Yeah, Peter Dinklage does not seem to talk about this publicly very much. I don't know what he does in the background and who he talks to when it comes to like executives or other actors about getting people hired, but yeah, this I haven't seen him talk publicly about this pretty much ever. Dinklage is one of the most prominent faces for disability representation and for the little people community in particular, but some little peoples are less than excited to have him take up the charge. Quote, Little Woman LA star and producer Tara Jolie said that while she appreciates Dinklage speaking out, his power and privilege also create adverse effects. Jolie said that many little people in the entertainment industry don't necessarily agree with Dinklage's take. People in her family auditioned for the Disney film. With his condemnation, she said Disney made Dinklage the sole arbiter on the topic. Yes, you would need to actually address more than, believe it or not, more than one person in a group will have, or a group will have people within it that have more than one idea or take on the matter of how to approach it. And that's why you need to not talk to a representative. It means you need to talk to that community, more than one. If you talk to a singular individual about their personal preference versus their political ideas about like how to move things forward versus talk to multiple people and get multiple takes on the subject. Quote, it boggles my mind that a network, instead of listening to an entire community, is listening to one person, she said. Quote, that's just how much pull this one person has created in the society because of where he is on the level of popularity. And that makes sense. And from a sort of executive stance, there's only like 4 guys making these decisions. And they're 4 guys who don't know dick or shit or care. Right? Like, David Zaslav doesn't give 2 shits about little people or minorities. He doesn't even care about his own fucking writers or his own fucking business that's gonna go down the goddamn drain. Same with Bob Iger, who's Disney. That's the Disney guy. These groups that are planning on starving the artists out, yeah, of course, they don't give a shit. You think they're gonna do the research and take the time out? No, of fucking course they're not going to. It's absolutely absurd that so few people making these decisions is, of course you're gonna get like the dumbest takes you could ever fucking get, and of course they're not gonna spend the time and effort. Not to mention that one of the diversity leaders in, I want to say HBO, Warner Brothers, was fired not long after the writer's strike started. Another member of the Little People community, journalist and documentarian Cara Reedy, was even blunter in her assessment. Quote, he's no dwarf hero, she said. Quote, he does not talk about it. He's talked about it twice. He pretends like it doesn't exist, but he has not assisted the Little People community. Representatives for Dinklage did not respond to the request for comment. Quote, it's appropriate that Peter spoke his truth about how he feels, but I don't feel that it's appropriate that he is including the entire dwarfism community, Reedy said. He's allowed to have his opinions, and he's allowed to express those opinions, but it doesn't make sense to have him being the only one speaking for this entire community. Right? It's like saying the only person who's allowed to talk about representation of black people in movies is Samuel L. Jackson. Like, that doesn't make sense. IndieWire reached out to multiple members of Little People acting community for this article. Jolie puts down their reluctance to comment down to fear of reprisal. The anonymous actor said, "No one wants to risk irritating a studio that controls 52% of the media." Disney owning 52% of the media is insane. What is that if not a fucking monopoly? That is so not good. Fucking Disney. I'm here to criticize Disney. I'm not here to criticize Disney. I'm not here to criticize Disney. I'm here to criticize Disney. Fuck you. You suck. Suck a dick. And you need to be torn apart into multiple little pieces instead of being the giant conglomerate monster that you are, you piece of trash. Particularly because you're limiting the stories that can be told, you're limiting creativity, you're limiting consumerism, and you're limiting capitalism in the way that you do business. So, fuck you. Especially one that regularly hires little people for Star Wars films and shows. An upcoming Disney Plus series even has a little people in the starring role with Warwick Davis as Farmer Willow Ufgood in Willow. Yeah, something that Ron Howard put together. And George Lucas, actually. And it got canceled, like fucking immediately. The unnamed actor said it's not necessarily that people from the disabled and little people communities don't want to talk, but they're more interested in doing work to upend the stereotype. So basically that means the idea is to get more little people out there and into the public eye so that way people can get used to them and give them a chance to present themselves so that way people want to see more of them in a wider spread of roles. That's what the unnamed actor is saying. I personally would most likely agree with that person from the knowledge that I have, that I think that's a good way to do it. It's one of those things where you kind of take what you can get it, and then use that influence that you garner from getting that thing to then expand. Quote, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, because in its production and by the biggest studio in the world that many people would like to work for, has actors walking a bit of a fine line, end quote. Added Jolie, quote, and the cancel culture is so huge right now that everyone is so scared to speak the truth because they don't want it to affect their job, end quote. And that is absolutely fair. You don't want to get accidentally blacklisted in your workplace. Other recent casting of little peoples in film and television include Guillermo del Toro's Nightmare Alley and own series The Kings of Napa. However, Jolie said that there's a severe downturn in roles being offered to under the guise of subverting stereotypes. Yeah. Quote, 5 years ago, there were consistent commercial auditions, she said, quote, because of equality and voices stating that they weren't okay with things like elf roles or dwarf roles or leprechaun roles, they've been eliminated. And not only are you not seeing a lot of little people in the acting industry anymore, but you're not seeing productions being created to give little people an actual role either. So there's an interesting way that you could have done this, right? The thing is there is diversity among minorities as well, right? So somebody who is a little person is not necessarily going to be of the same ethnic background as another little person. So you could still have that kind of diversity within the dwarves, and you could have them, instead of living together in one place and all working in the mine, you could utilize their happy, grumpy, silly, smiley, right? Or sorry, happy, grumpy, silly, sneezy, doc, dopey, and the shy one, blush, bashful. You could still have their personality traits, but play them in a way that is not cartoony, and you could play them subversive. So like the reason that Grumpy is because Grumpy works in the mine because he's the best at it, not because he likes it. And he makes that sacrifice for the community. Or he's not a morning person, right? And so he has to get up in the morning to go mining. And he's just like, he's drinking this cup of coffee, eating it. He's eating the mug. Like, you know what I mean? So you could take those character traits and you could play them up in a way that makes it still very, very diverse, and it takes them away from just being like identical dwarves that are only recognized by their personalities, and turns them into individuals. And instead of having them live in a house, you have them live in like a communal space, so that all of them do kind of different jobs. You got 7 of them, so it's like these guys take care of cooking, these guys take care of farming, these guys take care of mining, these guys take care of like going out and selling and refining the ores that they get and bringing back whatever the villagey needs, and then it's not nearly as weird, and you take out all those negative, weird, dwarfy stereotypes of them all living together in this one. You can take all that out, right? And what I would also do is I would make Snow White look incredibly uncomfortable, right? Because everything should be sized for them. Like, they built this village. Everything should be their size, and everything fits for them perfectly, and does not fit for Snow White. So they should have, like, her struggling to try to coexist in this community, and being treated kindly, but as an outcast, and also, like, bonking her head off of shit. You know what I mean? I think that would be interesting. You'd be able to show off, you'd be able to spend more time with the dwarves, characterize them, show off the capabilities of the actors that you hire, and just bring about a breath of fresh air for that community. You could do so much good with this. Like Gandalf in the Shire. Gandalf was, like, way the fuck out. He had the crouch everywhere, knocking his head off of shit. Like, it makes total sense. And you could, and, like, you can let the actress who's playing Snow White kind of, like, chest her chops or show off what she can do by being in this situation of being, like, very kind and sweetly, but very, very awkward and uncomfortable. And they don't even all have to be men. You can hire little people of men and women and just build this little, like, a community, right? That's how I would do it. That's what I would propose as somebody who's like, hey, I'm a studio executive, or hey, I'm a producer and I want to make this. And then you say, okay, here's my idea. Here's how I think I can make it good for the people that are involved and make it into an interesting and valuable story that people may not have heard, and what twist I wanted to add, but also then pull in people from the community and consult with them about, like, okay, here's my idea. Where can you help me make it better, both in general, but also better for you? And then just expand from there. Some members of the Little People community accept the more stereotypical acting opportunities. Others, like Reedy, believe the roles like these perpetuates a system that prefers to cast little people as leprechauns and elves. According to Little People of America, about 30,000 people in the United States have some sort of dwarfism. The number grows to 651,700 worldwide. Odds are many people don't interact with little people in their lives, and that leaves on-camera portrayals to foster awareness about dwarfism. It would be really interesting if Snow White had more people with dwarfism in it than just the dwarfs. So, like, maybe there's people in whatever village that Snow White goes to visit, and there's just some little people that live in that village, and the dwarves that are just, like, they're just an isolated community that live on the outskirts because that's where they choose to live for whatever reason. You could make them outcasts, or you could make it so that, like, no, we're a small community that does this specific job for the larger community, but we need to live out here at this frontier area because this work needs to get done, and you can have them doing that work and make them an invaluable member to, like, the members of, like, the kingdom at large, right? So, like, you would show off, like, Snow White or the Queen utilizing these resources, and it turns out that these resources are expensive and invaluable, and they actually come from that outskirt city, right? And so or community, and so you could take something like that, right? And that would allow you to show off dwarfism, it just existing in the world in general, but also, like, this just happens to be a unique group that lives in this community, right? And so, like, just having, to me it makes no sense that you would have a Dungeons and Dragons movie and shrink fucking, what's his face? What the fuck was his name? Shit. What's his name? Brain. Hello? They shrunk people for that movie. Why wouldn't you just hire little people and allow them to exist in the world? Like, you built Aarakocra and Dragonborn. Why would you not just have little people existing in the background and being, like, giving them a talking role here or there? Because they just... Bradley Cooper, thank you. Fucking... Why was Bradley Cooper even in this fucking movie? Go away! But like, why wouldn't you cast somebody with dwarfism in a D&D party if you want to make your D&D party look like a D&D party? You know what I mean? Like, almost nobody in a D&D party is a human. Very few people play humans. You could absolutely have, like, to me, it makes no sense to have a fantasy world that doesn't just have little people living in it. Right? Just living in it. They may or may not even be recognized as a different race. You could have a fantasy world and just put little people in it. More of them, all over the place. That's a great idea. Give me more. Thank you. Like, that'd be great. 10 out of 10. You don't even have to recognize, you don't even have to identify them as dwarves or as hobbits or anything. You could have hobbits and you can have dwarves and you could just throw little people everywhere. And it would make total sense. And they would just add so much to the visualization of the world, and it's just sad that we don't get that because we suck. Quote, this has real-world effects. People harass, people are violated, said Reedy, who's been forced to deal with strangers asking, quote, which one of the 7 dwarfs she is. Quote, there's violence perpetrated against us every day, and part of that comes from these representations. As I don't even have dwarfism, and I have experienced strangers just picking me up. For Jolie, hopefully I'm pronouncing their name correctly. I apologize. I'm just reading it. I don't know what your name sounds like, so if I got your name wrong, I'm very, very sorry. For Jolie, if individual performers don't want to audition for stereotypical role, they shouldn't. If they don't like a project, then don't support it. Beyond that, quote, I'm not saying mind your business, but don't speak out about it. As with other issues of representation in Hollywood, the real answer to this issue goes beyond casting. It comes down to hiring little people to write, produce, and direct. Those occurrences remain very rare, although Dinklage does have a number of producing credits, including Brothers, now in production starring Dinklage opposite Brendan Fraser, our boy, the king, Josh Brolin, and Glenn Close. Oh, Glenn Close is lovely. Back in 2017, Dinklage was attached as a producer and star of an adaptation by the Nobel Prize-winning Swedish author Par Lagerkvist. Title: The Dwarf. Oh yeah, of course. There's gonna be a lot of problems with the Snow White shit. Do not be surprised to see stupid chuds on the internet complaining about Snow White not being white enough. Being like, oh, but she's supposed to be fair-skinned, and her skin's supposed to be white as snow. Fuck off, nobody cares. It's fine. It's not an issue. I looked at a picture of the woman playing the role. She looks lovely. She's gonna look gorgeous in the role. Fuck off. But, yeah, it's gonna have a plethora of problems, just from a production standpoint, and from, like, just being a good movie standpoint. There's no need to be racist about it. That's all I had about that. Hopefully things move in a better direction. Maybe the writer's strike will help with that. Getting more writers and more diversity and getting more budget put into writing and more consistent work tables will help with these kinds of things. And I want to see more. I don't like having to watch. There's a reason I've gotten bored of watching movies and why I don't really watch movies, even when people recommend them to me. Mostly because I'm bored. It's the same fucking story over and over and over again. Most things are predictable or bad. And so I don't tend to invest too much into watching very many movies. I just don't care. Like, I fell off of Marvel, too. I'm like, I can't be bothered. And, like, the way you fix that same story over and over and over again is to hire more people, get more diverse ideas and more interesting things brought to the forefront. But that's just me. What do I know? Nothing. I don't know nothing. As somebody who is, by the way, I'm going to get on my soapbox. As somebody who is half an inch off from being legally disabled for being short, I do not have dwarfism, and I cannot speak for this community. I just think this is an issue that I wanted to, like, and I had read about and heard about, and I wanted to share it with you guys. I don't want to speak for these people. I just want to bring more awareness. So hopefully I'm helping. If I'm not helping or I get something wrong, anybody that's part of any of those communities, please, 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 please reach out to me and let me know. And if you want to come on and talk and get your thoughts out, I'm more than happy to keep you anonymous one way or another.